Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's army says the Indian leadership's irresponsible statements pose a serious threat to regional peace. Speaking in Rawalpindi, the military spokesperson said the army is ready to give a befitting response if India imposes a war on Pakistan. He said the international community must take notice of Indian actions in occupied Kashmir, which could lead to destabilization in the region. He said Pakistan's civilian and military leadership want peace in the region. He said Kashmir has been occupied by Indian forces for 71 years, but New Delhi still couldn't overcome the Kashmiri people's desire for freedom. Pakistan's army has killed 5 terrorists in an operation in North Waziristan's Dattakhel town. The army's media wing says 2 army soldiers, Mohammad Shamim and Asad Khan, were martyred during the operation. Inter-Services Public Relations said the operation was conducted on intelligence information. The U.S. Department of Defense has identified 2 of its airmen killed in a military plane crash in Afghanistan. On Monday, the Taliban claimed shooting down the Bombardier E-11A used by U.S. forces for battlefield communications. The Pentagon said 46-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Paul Voss, who previously served Virginia Air Command Headquarters, was among the dead. It said the second airman was 30-year-old Captain Ryan Finoff from Hudson, New Hampshire. The Pentagon said the men were supporting Operation Freedom Sentinel for the U.S. mission in Afghanistan. In Syria, 10 people have been killed, including 5 women, after airstrikes by Russia reportedly hit civilian targets in opposition-held Idlib. A war monitor said the strikes hit an area near a medical clinic in the town of Aria in Idlib province. It said 3 entire buildings had collapsed nearby. The latest deaths bring the total number of civilians killed by Russian airstrikes in Idlib over the past 24 hours to 21. However, the Russian Foreign Ministry has denied bombing these locations. Russia has rejected the UN Secretariat's data on civilian casualties in Syria's Idlib province. This comes after UN Under-Secretary General Mark Lowcock accused Syria's government and its allies of killing civilians in airstrikes. At the UN Security Council meeting last night, Britain and the US accused Russia and China of cutting humanitarian aid for the millions of Syrians. Denying the accusations, Russia's representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, said the source of the UN data on Syrian casualties is unknown. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry claims no civilians were affected in the attack by Syrian government forces against the militants in Idlib. It said they are working in the town of Marat al-Noman, retaken from militants, to provide civilians with food and daily necessities. Moving on to China, where the death toll from the new coronavirus sweeping China has risen to 170. With a confirmed case in Tibet, the virus has now spread to every region in mainland China and at least 20 other countries. More in this report.
As China wrestles with the coronavirus, over 1,000 new cases of the disease have emerged in the past 24 hours, making a total number of 7,700. The World Health Organization meets today to decide if the disease is serious enough to warrant a global health emergency. The international health body says despite a small number of cases outside China, the virus has the potential for a far larger outbreak.
But the whole world needs to be on alert now. The whole world needs to take action and be ready for any cases that come, either from the original epicenter or from other epicenters that become established.
The EU says nearly 600 European citizens in China want to be repatriated. It said all member states want to bring their citizens home. The bloc says they can't put hundreds of people on one plane without screening them first.
What is specific about this virus is that these are complex operations. You don't now send a plane to Wuhan, you load up the people and you go back home. You have to screen the people. You don't want a plane with 200 people and one of them is infected and infects everybody else on the flight back. When they come back, you have to have quarantine facilities.
Starbucks and Tesla have closed their outlets and offices in the country. They are joined by Google, which has shut its offices because of the outbreak.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has set up an emergency center at the Ministry of Health to prevent the coronavirus from entering and spreading in the country. In a press briefing, Foreign Office spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said a high-powered committee is considering steps to protect citizens. She said Pakistan is in touch with China to ensure the safety of its nationals. Farooqi said the opening of the Khunjra border with China has also been rescheduled to April from February. In China, Beijing streets and shopping malls are empty as the coronavirus outbreak overshadows Chinese New Year celebrations. Over 2,000 stores in the country have already been closed because of the epidemic. What in this report?
The week-long Lunar New Year holiday usually sees audiences flooding into cinemas and people with their families crowding into tourist sites. This year is different. Public areas, including every tourist trap, have been closed by fears of the infectious coronavirus. Starbucks now has signs asking customers to wear a mask before entering the cafe.
And now I have to go back early to my home. And I couldn't even see the places that I wanted. Like I really wanted to see the Great Wall and I won't be able to see it. And it's my first time here in Asia. And I feel very unlucky.
Another worry is the economy, with residents and investors alike concerned by the economic hit the disease will cause. It's believed output could be reduced and businesses at every level undermined by travel restrictions introduced by the government to slow the spread of the virus.
I am sure it will affect the national economy. It's during the Spring Festival and it's in the holiday season. However, you see, there are not many people on the streets in Beijing. I feel the impact will be extremely big. Therefore, I hope people in Hubei will stop eating wild animals and food without inspection. I think it's a disaster.
170 people have lost their lives so far as the virus spreads its reach across China and into at least 16 other countries.
Israeli forces have wounded 41 Palestinians protesting against US President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan across the West Bank. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said Israeli forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets. It said demonstrators were wounded in the towns of Tulkarm and Al-Birwa, as well as the Arub refugee camp and villages north of the Jordan Valley. The protesters chanted slogans against the plan, saying Palestine is not for sale. Hundreds of Palestinian refugees took to the streets of Beirut in Lebanon to protest against Trump's deal. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will visit the UN within 2 weeks to address the Security Council on his rejection of the new plan. Meanwhile, Israeli warplanes have bombed multiple locations in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry says its jets struck Hamas posts in the southern city of Khan Yunis and the central city of Deir al-Bala. Security officials said 2 successive airstrikes were carried out in retaliation for rocket launches from within the strip. They said a rocket was fired from Gaza into Israel. No casualties have been reported so far. The attack came shortly after Israel announced it would step up its military presence in the West Bank and near Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Moscow to discuss the U.S. Middle East peace plan with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan gives Israel a green light to annex key parts of the occupied West Bank. Netanyahu said Putin is the first leader he is meeting to know his opinion on Trump's deal. Netanyahu also thanked the Russian president for pardoning Israeli national Nama Issachar, who was sentenced in Moscow on drug smuggling charges. Meanwhile, in the West Bank city of Bethlehem, Israeli border guards fired tear gas on the Palestinian demonstrators against Trump's plan. The U.S. has issued fresh sanctions on Russia over its annexation of Crimea. The U.S. Treasury Department has blacklisted 8 individuals and a Moscow-based railway company. In a statement, the department said it blacklisted Crimea's pro-Russian Prime Minister Yuri Gotsenyuk. It said the Grand Service Express that operates in Crimea has also been sanctioned. The Treasury Department said the individuals were being sanctioned by both Canada and the EU. The Russian embassy in Washington says the sanctions will not make Moscow change its policies. It said the curbs will only erode the basis for bilateral cooperation. The Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly has voted to fully restore the rights of the Russian delegation. Officials say 96 lawmakers voted in favor, while 44 were against the move and 7 abstained from voting. The draft resolution says the Assembly wants to assess the progress made until PACE co-rapporteurs visit Russia. The PACE noted Russia has fulfilled some recommendations included in the resolution for its return to the body. The measures included Moscow's participation in prisoner swap with Ukraine and progress towards the Minsk agreements. Members of the PACE drafted the resolution in June last year. In India, an unidentified man has opened fire at a rally protesting against the controversial citizenship law in New Delhi. In a video, a man can be seen opening fire at the protesters, shouting, "Here is your freedom." The incident happened after radical outfit Indus Special threatened to remove Anti-Citizenship Act protesters in Delhi by force. In a statement, Indus Special President Vishnu Gupta said they will remove whom he called jihadists on 2nd of February by force. Gupta said his party has told allies and people from nearby villages to gather near the protesting site. The Shaheen Bagh's all-women sit-in has continued since 16th of December, calling the law discriminatory against Muslims. A New York-based committee to protect journalists has denounced India's claim of restoring internet in occupied Kashmir. Last week, New Delhi restored 2G internet in the valley after 6 months with access to only 300 whitelist websites. In a statement, the committee said New Delhi's claim is a complete farce. It said all news websites are still blocked and internet speeds are too slow for journalists to be able to work. It said India's curbs on internet services completely disregard the right to freedom of speech. The committee demanded the complete and immediate restoration of the internet. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Welcome back. Turkey says France is responsible for Libya's instability, accusing Paris of wanting to control Tripoli's natural resources. Turkish Foreign Ministry spokesman Hami Aksoy said Paris has been supporting Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar since 2011. Aksoy said France should stop backing Haftar if it wants to implementation decisions taken at this month's Berlin conference. He said Haftar's attack on the legitimate government is a threat to the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. The remarks came after French President Emmanuel Macron accused Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan of ramping up interference in Libya. Macron claimed Turkish ships carrying Syrian mercenaries have been seen arriving on Libyan soil. In Pakistan, 11 people have died and 6 others were injured when a passenger van crashed and caught fire near the eastern province of Punjab. Officials say the speeding van lost control after one of its tires burst. Rescue officials said 6 wounded have been shifted to a hospital in Lahore. They said that there are 3 women among the deceased. Officials said only 3 bodies have been identified. The van carrying 18 passengers was traveling from Lahore to Islamabad. The death toll from floods in southeast Brazil's Minas Gerais state has risen to 54. Officials say the region recorded its heaviest rain in 110 years. Disaster officials say 45 people died in Minas Gerais, while 9 others were killed in neighboring Espírito Santo. Officials say other states in the region have also suffered deaths and severe damage, with 19 people still missing. Nearly 28,000 people have been evacuated, while 101 towns declared a state of emergency. Belo Horizonte recorded 180 millimeters of rain in 3 hours, causing damage to dozens of neighborhoods. Nobel Peace Laureate Malala Yousafzai has joined over 2,000 activists to declare a state of emergency for people and the planet. The declaration is part of an open letter addressed to the world leaders who signed up the UN's program to tackle poverty, inequality and climate change by 2030. The advocates are demanding urgent action to deal with global-scale problems and conditions they say are only getting worse. Along with Yousafzai, environmentalist Jane Goodall and screenwriter Richard Curtis are also among the signatories. The letter was coordinated by Project Everyone, co-founded by Curtis, to raise awareness of global development goals. The American aerospace company SpaceX has launched its fourth batch of 60 Starlink satellites. This is the second part of its 2020 push to put 1,500 satellites into orbit by the end of the year.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff.
A sooty Falcon 9 rocket roared to life, lifting off from Space Launch Complex at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. The rocket carried 60 more Starlink satellites for SpaceX's growing constellation. The satellites all successfully deployed to low Earth orbit about an hour after liftoff. Last May, SpaceX launched the first batch of operational satellites. There are now 240 circling the Earth. SpaceX eventually wants to fly humans to the International Space Station.
Right, and yes.
The Pakistani government is holding a two-day conference in Kenya in a major trade outreach to Africa. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has already arrived in Nairobi to attend the Pakistan-Africa Trade Development Conference being held on Thursday and Friday. Earlier, in a statement, the Foreign Office said Commerce and Foreign Ministries are hosting the conference that will strengthen economic ties between the two countries. It said Kenyan cabinet members, dignitaries from other African states and Pakistani envoys in Africa will attend the conference. It said the move is part of Pakistan's Engage Africa initiative to forge closer ties with the African continent. In Iran, demonstrators regularly burn US, Israeli and British flags during rallies and protests. As tensions between Tehran and Washington have grown, so has business at Iran's largest flag factory. More about the unique company in this report.
At this factory in the town of Khomein, southwest of the capital of Tehran, young men and women print flags by hand and hang them to dry. At its busiest, the facility produces 2,000 US and Israeli flags a month. It makes over 1.5 million square feet of flags each year.
We have no problem with the American and British people. We have a problem with our governors. We have a problem with their presidents with the wrong policy that they have.
The assassination of Iran's leading military commander Qasem Soleimani has once again brought out anti-American sentiments.
Compared to the cowardly actions of the United States, such as General Qasem Soleimani's assassination, this burning an American flag is a minimal thing against them. This is the least that can be done.
This is not always the case. At protests, when Tehran confessed to shooting down a Ukraine passenger plane, young demonstrators refused to run over the American flag painted on the street in Tehran.
Apple and its component supplier Broadcom have just been fined $1.1 billion for the copyright infringement. Los Angeles Court has ordered them to pay the California Institute of Technology for breaking university patents. The Tech Research University alleged Broadcom of Wi-Fi chips in Apple iPhones violate patents on data transmission technology. Apple said it will appeal the verdict. In its court filings, the tech giant argued it used off-the-shelf Broadcom chips but not the disputed component. Stock markets across Europe are trading lower over fears of a pandemic as the coronavirus death toll surges. Investors have rushed to stockpile safe haven stocks after selling off major equity stocks. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 1.5% lower ahead of a major economic data set to be released later in the day. Frankfurt's DAX has lost over 1% as shares of Germany's largest lender, Deutsche Bank, slipped 0.5%. London's FTSE 100 is trading 0.75% lower after BT Group shares fell 4.5%. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng led the losses, closing over 2.5% lower. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.